kept my arms wrapped around IRVO all the time. They tried talking to him, but how do you talk to 12 police officers?
Exactly.
They have their tasers out, and they have guns on their hip.
IRVO Otieno had very compelling information that she gave in that interview. And we're going to take a few minutes here. You know, it's going to be like, I think around 8 to 10 minutes long. So I want you to pay attention to what she said. And then we are going to come back and interrogate what she said. So producer, please play that clip.
IRVO, was going through mental distress. He periodically gets to a point where, he needs hospitalization. And then he has long stretches where he's fine and then he's doing okay. And anyway, so March the 3rd, he was going through distress.
Yes.
And I had called his private doctor. He has a private doctor that takes care of him. And as you know, I called the doctor, but then before the doctor could send any help, the police appeared at my door.
Okay.
And at that point, I was under the assumption that since I was talking to the doctor's office, they were going to send me a mental health team.
Right.
So when they made the call, they were looking for a mobile mental health team. Then my doctor's office found out that we didn't have any in our county at that point, Anyway, we were in the house and I stepped out to make a phone call. In the back of our house, we have the back driveway, and he was able to cross over and was knocking on my neighbor's door. So it was just a knock on the door, and I was sitting in my car making the call. And he knocked, and then when I saw him, I came on outside and I said, come on, son, let's go home.
Right.
And with that, he picked a few light sticks, the light sticks that you can put around the house to light your house. He picked maybe just about 2 or 3 of them and brought them with him. In a few minutes, I saw my neighbor's truck pulling up back into their driveway. And I walked out there. I don't know this man. He does not live in our neighborhood, but I know he comes to that house. There's a girl who lives there who is his girlfriend. I had never interacted with him closely to know his name because you rarely see him, Like I said, he doesn't live here. So anyway, walked to him, and I mentioned to him that my son was going through distress, mental distress, and that my son was at their door and was knocking. And I let him know that I was calling the doctor and talking to the doctor and trying to get, help for my son. And so with that, I thought that was the end of that, but evidently he went ahead and called the police, He went ahead and called the police and reported it to the police. So we came back inside the house, and through my back door, it's a glass door. I looked outside, and in a few minutes, there were 2 police cars that had pulled and parked parallel in front of their house.
Wow.
And at this point, IRVO was upstairs. He was just kind of in his room doing his music and arranging his stuff. So I looked out my front window, which is a wide bay window, and I looked out and I could see the police spread out on our yard. There were about 12 police officers at that point.
Yeah.
And they had their tasers drawn out and their thumbs on the hip. And so I called IRVO and I said, IRVO, I see police officers outside. And he said, well, Mama, I've seen them where I am. I'm coming. And I said, come on downstairs. Because at this point I'm confused. I'm thinking maybe the doctor's office has sent me the mental health team, And and police officers. I didn't know, what was going on. So he came downstairs, and I said, well, let me go outside and talk to them. And being the young man that he is, IRVO takes care of me. He takes care of his mother.
Yeah,
of course.
He said, no, Mom.
Yeah.
Yes, he said, Mom, you're not going out there. Let me come down. I'm the one who will open the door. And I said, all right, come on. So he came on and he opened the door, but I was standing right there close to him because I was concerned for him. So I enveloped myself around him and covered him up. And when I covered him up, we stepped out on the step. And no sooner did we step out, I raised my voice and I said, my son is going through a mental distress. And I said, is this the mental health team? And they said, oh, no, the mental health team is not here yet. And I said, well, you need to call them. And then I also told them to keep their tasers away, because it's very scary to someone who is already going through mental distress. Even for me, to see them coming up armed like that was very scary for me.
Yeah.
So I kept my arms wrapped around IRVO all the time. They tried talking to him, but how do you talk to 12 police officers who have their tasers out and they have guns on their hip? They were tone deaf because when I raised my voice, kuambia, my son is going through mental distress, they didn't make any adjustments. They didn't change anything. I didn't see them radioing maybe and saying, oh, yes, this is what we're dealing with, bring an ambulance or anything. So at that point, they tried talking to him. I tried explaining to them, that he was going through a period where he's not feeling well. He needs attention, needs medical attention. So they took time and spoke amongst themselves, and then they handcuffed him. They handcuffed him and were leading him to a vehicle that they had parked in front, in front of our house. They didn't even explain that a neighbor had called them. They didn't say why they were handcuffing him.
Yeah.
We tried to ask them, and they didn't explain anything. So they handcuffed him, and they were walking him to that squad car. And he kept asking them, why they were, where am I going? Why do I have to go into a squad car? So he refused to get into that squad car, and I don't blame him. They tried kind of pushing him into that car, and I was standing on the side, and they had 2 police officers kind of watching me. I couldn't even move closer to him. And I raised my voice and I said, call an ambulance. My son is in distress. He needs to go to the hospital then. So eventually they called an ambulance, and all this took about 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes. Eventually they took us to the hospital. I asked them to take us to a close by hospital. They disregarded that and took us to another hospital, which is called Henrico Doctors Hospital. So I followed them up there. And by the time I got there, my son was already being seen by a doctor. So the doctor came out to speak to me and sat down with me for 20 minutes to get his history. And he assured me that I'm going to do, the best I can. I think I can help him. I already, I've given him an injection and he's doing better. So I was hopeful. Well, I sat there in an hour. I went up to the desk and I asked to be given, permission to go back and see him. They wouldn't let me. So in another hour, I made another attempt to go back and see him, and they refused me. The doctor came out and told me that he had managed to sleep for at least 40 minutes. And I said, yes, that's good, because he hadn't slept for 3 days. So on the third attempt to see him, they were still refusing me. And I said, why can't I go back there? And they told me the police are back there with him. At that point, I said, could you call the police officer for me? Let me talk to him. So the officer came on out. And when I asked him why I couldn't see my son, he said, oh, he's agitated right now. You can't go back there. I told him, officer, I'm here. I'm his mother. I'm advocating for my son. Why can't I go back there and see him? And he said, oh, he's agitated right now. And then I thought in my mind, how agitated can he be when he's already getting treatment? The doctor told me that he was able to rest for 40 minutes. And then came to find out he was trapped on a bed at that point in the bath. Yeah, eventually they whisked him out of the hospital through the back door. They never told me anything, took him to jail. So anyway, he stayed in the jail over the weekend. Saturday morning I went there. When I went there Saturday morning, I was able to catch someone, the social worker, and speak to the social worker. But he wasn't seeing any doctors. There was no medication. He didn't receive any attention over the weekend. So they moved him to jail, but they didn't move him. They pulled him off of treatment at the hospital and moved him to jail without any medication.
What?
Yes. So he stayed the whole weekend like that. And I was back again Saturday afternoon to jail. Then I was back there again Sunday. And on Sunday I was told, oh, you know, until he sees the doctor on Monday, he can't be given anything.
All right. Thank you so much. That was Miss Caroline Oko, the mother of the late IRVO Otieno, speaking to Vibes Radio in Nairobi. You know, like she was speaking exclusively to Vibes Radio, and she gave her point of view.